everyone, and welcome. My name is Lori Rubin, and I am here with Abba Shapiro, who's going to be doing a great presentation today on the history panel and how to save your history. Now, Abba is a professional photographer and videographer, along with being a wonderful educator, and with a very impressive resume of companies that he's worked with. He's a Skylum evangelist, and you'll be seeing many more upcoming videos and tutorials and webinars related to Luminar and Aurora from him. So we're very excited, Abba, to have you on this webinar. And
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and let him take over the presentation. And great, so thank you very much. We'll go ahead and get started.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us in today's webinar. And this is pretty much what we're going to cover. We're going to focus on the history panel, but before we get into that, I'm going to give a quick overview of Luminar because I know some of the folks listening in and watching, it's a very new application to you and maybe you haven't even opened it before. So just to give you a sense of what the application is and what it can do, we'll spend about 5 minutes on that. And then we're going to dig into the history panel and you'll be pretty impressed about what it allows you to do and the flexibility it provides. So you should be seeing the my interface on your screen. We have a finished product here that I shot just a little picture. It wasn't an HDR picture, not a little picture, but it was camera raw. And I took this image and I really pumped Luminar's filters through it and got something that I really like. Now, if you notice, the center part of the image is my photograph. On the right, I have a control panel where I can add filters and add layers. And at the very bottom of the interface, there is a series of presets that I can apply to my images. And if you haven't used the application before, you'll notice that when I click on the word categories, it actually opens up a dialog box where I can see a variety of presets that either shipped with the application, additional free presets that you can download. A lot of times when we run a webinar or send out our newsletter, we'll give you a link to the presets of the month that you can add. And as you can see, there's a pretty diverse grouping, whether you're shooting aerial photography with a drone or you're shooting portraits. There's quite a variety of these presets where you can get a look without having to really dig deeply into the application. So for instance, if I wanted to switch over to just some of the basic presets, I can click on that, and then as we go along the bottom of the page, I can try out some of these presets and apply them to my image. And when I apply this, it's going to apply it to an earlier iteration of my image. So let me go ahead and double click on that. And I think with all this recording, I'm not seeing necessarily the response I want, but I can switch to that. But the point of, the biggest point to walk away with the presets is you're not fixed. It basically provides a variety of filters on your clip. And then if you don't quite like what the preset has, you can play with the sliders and you can really refine the image in the way you envision it. So let's go ahead and explore this image and explore history. Anytime you're working in Luminar, you can very easily switch back and look at what your original image was. In the top middle of the screen, there's a little button, that's a quick preview button. And if I click on that, I can see what the original image looked like out of camera. And you'll notice it really doesn't pop. The sky's fairly gray. There's people in the bottom right corner of the screen. And there's even a little bit of distortion because I used a very wide angle lens. This was actually a 16mm lens, and I wasn't as far away as it appears. So I can toggle back and forth between my original image and my final image so I can see where I've come from. In addition, I can also move a little bit over to the right of that to the compare button. And what this allows me is to see both my current image and my original image at the same time and move a slider back and forth. Now let me go ahead and turn that off. I'm going to step briefly over to the right panel here. And this is where you can see all the changes, or this is where you'll have all the controls to modify your images in the application. So for instance, I might have done a black and white conversion to this image. I then may have added other elements to this image. And I can sit here and I can step through and go back in time, turning layers on and off if I wish to. Now, we have a variety of training webinars available, and at the end of the presentation, Lori is going to show you where you can look on the website to find additional training, both in short 3 to 5 minute tutorials, as well as the longer webinars. So what I want to focus on here is the history panel at this point. So I've done a lot of editing to this image, and I can simply go up to the top of my interface, and there's 2 buttons here that will be very valuable to you. On the left is just a undo button, stepping back. Command or Control Z will just take you back 1 step at a time through the history of all your changes. But the really valuable panel is the history, and if I click on that, I can see everything that I have done to get my image to where it is. And one of the things you can see, in addition to the image changing, is I went back far enough that I hadn't already erased the people from this image. I'm scrolling down and I can see all of the edits that I have done to this image, and I can step back to any point in time and see exactly where I was. And as I indicated before, these people are in the lower right-hand corner of my image, and also some of the structure and I've added, and some of the punch to the vibrance isn't there. But if I want to go back to a later point in time, I can simply jump to that point, click on that point in history, and it will bring my image forward. So right here, you notice that I've had some of the changes. I was playing with some things. I tried one of the, really intense presets, didn't like it. And as I moved forward, I made many different changes, but I can jump right back to the most recent point in time. So this is really very cool, but this isn't the best part. The best part is when you are working on an image and you save that image to a Luminar project file, all of your history can be, and by default is, saved to that project file. So if I go back and open this image a week later, a month later, or next year, I still have access to every single change, every single slider that I adjusted, every layer that I made in the original editing of the document. And so what I'm going to do is actually open up a new document and show you how that works. So this was a complex one. I'm going to go ahead, close this document, and I don't need to save that now. And inside of Luminar, I'm simply going to open up a recent document. As a matter of fact, we'll take a look at opening up a TIFF document here. And so here we have a headshot that I was working on. And when I first open up a document, you'll notice that the undo button and the history button are grayed out. And that's pretty obvious because we haven't done anything yet. But as soon as I start making any changes using any one of my filters, it's going to start recording the history. Now, it's always a good rule of thumb to save your document before you really get into editing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to switch over to my Finder because I want you to see the dialog box with some of the options you have when you save a document. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And I have a pop-up window that shows my Finder. So let me, actually, you might be able to see this because I'm showing my screen. Can you all see this
Yes.
save dialog box?
Yes, we see that.
Excellent. Easier than switching around. So you'll notice at the bottom part of this is that checked is save original resources to document, and then there's also one that's checked that says save history to document. So just to give you a little bit of an overview how this works, if you uncheck everything, and I want you to take a look at this number down here, this 57.4 megabytes, and if I uncheck all of these, the project file is really small. It's just basically the math of the filters. But you generally don't want to save it this way because you haven't embedded your original media into the project file. You really want to save that original JPEG or TIFF file or RAW file in the project file so you can move it anywhere you want, and no matter where it is when you open it up, you will have your source document. So if I click on that and I save the original, you see it jumps back to 57.4 megabytes. But this is where the magic happens. If I click Save History to Document, and this is what I highly recommend, is it will save all of those steps, and you'll notice it did not change the size of the document. That's because it's literally kilobytes of information. So don't uncheck that thinking that you'll save some space, because it's much better to save that information so you can always go back and make changes. For those of you who are working on a Windows machine, I'm going to go ahead and check that. So what happens with Windows is that at this point, we can't necessarily save the history. This is going to be in one of the next releases. They're working on that. So with a Windows version of the application, it will save the original resource and save the document, but you won't have that history that you can go back to a year later or 6 months later. But that's actually going to come to parity within the next month or two, because they're hard at work making sure that Windows and Macs work exactly the same way. Now, once I have successfully saved this document, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck Windows and bring this back to the Mac, and I'll hit save. It creates a Luminar project file, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if you notice to the left, these are standard images that you would expect when you are saving any document. And I'm going to zoom in, and can you all, did the zoom effect, did you see the zoom work?
No.
Or are you still seeing full screen?
Yeah, just regular screen size.
Okay, well, good to know. But hopefully you can see that we have traditional images. And as a matter of fact, I know a trick I can do. I can go ahead and make this all bigger. And so if it's an actual file that you exported, or the original file, you will see the image. But any of the files that are Luminar projects will have this icon. And this indicates that if I double click it, it will open up what I've saved with all of the history. So for instance, if I want to go back and let's say open a previous project, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to one of the places. So we'll go back here and open up maybe this Niagara Falls shot. So this is something I saved. I saved all of my history, and I do that by default. It'll take a little bit to open because I made this unusually large with lots of little changes to an original image. So there we go. It is now processing everything. So this is my final image. And once again, if I wanted to, I could see the before and the after. And as you see, Luminar can really make your photography pop. It can really emphasize the areas you want and de-emphasize the areas that you do not want. But this is where the history panel will come into play. If I click on this, I can see everything I've done all the way back to the beginning to build this image. And this can be really advantageous. I indicated earlier that one of the benefits is just being able to compare your image from an earlier point in time to its current point in time. And as long as you don't make any changes, you can always go back. And let me explain that a little bit further. So if I go back here and I say, I just want to see what it was like when I applied a gradient mask. And I click on that, and it will step back, and in a moment you'll notice that what I've done is I actually did a gradient because I wanted the sky to pop, and I can see how that looks. And then if I decide I do like it, I can, as I said, easily go back to a later point in time. However, if I go back to a certain point in time, and I'm going to go back maybe even a little bit earlier to where I have a copy of the original raw file enabled. And at this point, if I make a change, I'm going to change history. It's pretty much like the movie Back to the Future. I'm going to create a new future. So if I go back and I make any changes here, maybe I will apply a new preset to this image. So I just applied a black and white preset. I'm going to grab the slider and bring it up a little bit, and maybe add a little bit of transparency. So basically I get a much more muted image. But let's take a look what happened to the history panel. You'll notice that I originally went back to where it says, and let me get that little pop-up that tells you where you are out of your view. This is where I had it activated. And as soon as I made some changes, it started to record the new changes, but everything that I had done after the point in time that I went back to is now gone. So you need to kind of know the power of this tool, but also some of the ways it works and how it might be a little bit dangerous. If you go back to the beginning and make a change, you could potentially lose some of the magic that you created. So it's always good to save an element. If you're opening up a project that is something maybe from a year ago and you're afraid that you might mess it up, you can easily duplicate it in the Finder before you open it up, and that way you have a complete backup. And the other thing that you can do is you can save it at that point in time before you go back and make changes. So let me go ahead and open up a brand new, or open up, let's see if I still have that document open here. Yeah, so I have the original document that I opened with no changes, and I'm gonna actually go through what I would normally do in a workflow to enhance this image. The first thing I like to do when I open an image is I'll go ahead and I will add my first filter, which is the develop filter, or if this was a camera raw image, it would actually say raw develop. But in a nutshell, they're very similar. The camera raw will give you a few more options, and that's because there's a lot more flexibility in working with camera raw images versus something such as a JPEG or a TIFF file. So I would take this image, and maybe I'd want to play with the contrast a little bit. This is pretty balanced, but I'm going to go ahead and hold down my Option key and make sure. If you hold down the Option key, you'll notice it goes white, but as I move my black slider to the left, eventually I'll see part of my image. And what this is telling me is I can go this dark and none of my dark or black areas will be crushed. And I can do the same thing with my really bright areas. If I just move it, it gets brighter in the whites, but if I hold down the Option as I move it, I can actually see what's getting blown out, so I can open this up as much as possible before it goes and gets completely washed out. So let's say I've made a few modifications. I've developed it to where the image is neutral, and that's really your goal in the first step, is just to get the image to make sure the color balance is nice, has good contrast, that it's not too bright, it's not too dark. And once you're happy with this, then you can start adding all of your presets, or you can just start adding filters as you see fit. Now, what I want to make sure is I don't lose everything in this first develop layer. So I'm immediately going to add an adjustment layer to this so that this doesn't get touched. Because right now, if I go here and I start playing on different presets, like I go to the sky enhancer, when you click on a preset, it will replace everything in this panel, including if you have other filters adjusted. So I'm going to go back here to my history. I will just go back before I hit that preset, and there we go. And now, instead of adding that to my first layer of filters, which is right here, that's my first layer, my original image, I'm going to go ahead and click on right above the presets, plus overlay presets. And what you'll notice is as I click this, it's going to add a new layer here in the upper right-hand corner where I can add all the filters or presets I want and not affect what's below it. So let me go ahead and pick up, we'll go with the classic black and white. Seem to be drawn to that. And as you can see, did I do that right? I believe I did add it. Let me undo that just to make sure. And this is what I really like about this. You can see if you've done something silly. It's like, did I add an overlay preset layer? And I did not. So let me go back, step back. I haven't lost anything that I've done. Click on Add Overlay Preset down here. Or I can also do it up here. And what it will do is add a new adjustment layer. So now I can apply my presets to this layer. I'm going to go ahead, go back to that black and white. We're going to add that. And this is simply a black and white conversion. This is one of the basic filters you can add, and this is all in the basics category. If I wanted to go a little fancier, maybe I'll look at some of the presets that are available. I can go into perhaps the dramatic presets that are available. And here I have a bunch of different images, and I really like the fact that I can kind of see a preview of what would happen when I click on any of these presets. Now, I had applied the black and white conversion, but I really didn't like that. It was too basic. I'm going to go ahead and maybe add artistic copper strong. And I want you to see what happens. This preset does not use that black and white conversion at all. It actually has replaced it. But the nice thing is that if I decided that I really did like it, I want to go back, that is available in my history, and I can jump back there. So if I've done the uh-oh, and this is the uh-oh that I do a lot, especially when it's late at night and I'm obsessed with editing an image, I may step through a variety of these presets, trying to figure out a good starting point based on what it's going to do. And then I realize I've lost everything I had done up until that point. And that's where I think the beauty of the history panel really comes into play, because there we are, all those different presets that I had tested out, and I can go back to artistic copper strong and get exactly where I want it to be. So there it is. It's applied to the layer. And if I look below, when this layer is selected, I can see all of the filters and all of the settings that are applied. If I go ahead and make a modification, maybe I like this, but I think it's a little bit too warm on my split color warmth. And what I really like about this part, or this filter, is you can actually warm up the warmer parts of your image or cool down the warmer parts of your image. And you can do the same thing with the cooler parts. So I can take the bluer parts and make them even bluer. Or I can say, something, I want everything to be a little bit warmer. So there's a little tip on using that filter. But what happens here in the history panel? Well, there it is. Not only do we see that I worked with this filter, I can even see all of the different settings that I had parked my cursor at. So it's very, very detailed. If I needed to see what was in a layer below, I can simply turn that off, and now I see my original layer with the modifications. And you'll notice that right now I'm seeing all of the filters for layer 1, which is my adjustment layer. But if I click on the original layer, it will show me the filters that I use specifically on that layer. And once again, stepping back into the history panel, it even goes down to I turned it off, I turned it on, layers were activated. Every action you take has been saved. So in addition to being able to save yourself when you've made a silly mistake, you can also go back and see, I really liked how I did something, but I really don't remember how I got there. And this is one of the unique features of being able to look at every step along the way. I can go and I can say, wow, I applied this preset. I played with the adjustments, but look, I ended up there. And I can find exactly how I got to this point. And because when I save this document, it saves the history, I can come back a week later, and had I forgotten how I did something, I can easily go back and recreate what I did. And so now I can go back and do the same thing to a new image, or if the client wants a modification, I can see exactly what I did, and I can very easily modify it and give them an alternative. So one of the things that you need to be aware of is that when you are saving a project, it saves all of that information, but it is still a Luminar project file. So you do not use save to get one of your images out to show a client, to post to a website. This is specifically so you can save the Luminar project. What you want to do to get a final image is go to export. And you can find this in a couple of locations. If you like, you can go down to the file menu for export. There's keyboard shortcuts for that if you're a keyboard shortcut person. This is Shift-Command-E for export. Or you can go all the way over to the right, and hopefully you can see this on your screen. There's a little button with an up arrow, and that is Share Image. So we're going to go there, and I'm going to show you what's in the dropdown. Now, hopefully you can see this dropdown. I think we fixed that problem from earlier. And if you look down at the bottom part of the image, you can export directly to a variety of social media. So if you finish an image and you just say, you know, I want to put it up to my 500px account, I want to load it onto Facebook, you can go directly there. But if you choose to save the image because perhaps you want to be able to work with it in another application, or you really want to make sure you like the way it looks before you post it, you would choose export to image. And what export to image will allow you to do is actually save your final image to whatever format you want. So you can do a little bit of sharpening afterwards. And as a matter of fact, one of the features that was improved on in Luminar 2018 was the post-sharpening filter. And this is really nice if you really want your image to pop. It gives it a little bit more punch, especially if you're putting it out to the web. You can resize this at any point. So you can resize it choosing whatever dimensions if you want to go custom, or you can say, you know something, I want to resize this, and it's important that it is no larger than a width of 1920 pixels. I'm going to skip the color space. Generally, you should leave it unless you have a specific reason to switch the color space, such as perhaps you may be going to print your final image. Leave it at sRGB, and then you can choose what format you want to save it in. And these are your options. You can save it with any of these wrappers, and depending on how you save it, of course, you have a variety of compression options. So if I save it as a JPEG, I can go ahead and say, you know, how sharp or how large or small I want the file. And if I switch to something such as TIFF, I get different options such as what is the compression strategy I want to use, or no compression at all. So you have full variety to save the images exactly how you want. I do want to point out that if you do save a Photoshop document, it will save it as a flattened document. It doesn't save the layers, and none of these save the history. This is also, you can export your image and do with it what you need to, whether that's to post it, to print it, to hand it off to a client. So this is how you would ultimately export your images. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here because obviously from this point on, you would know how to export an image, but it is important to understand the nuance of difference between export and save. One of the last areas I want to cover before maybe we open it up to some questions and clarifications is, what if I want to save my document at various states? So as you can see, I have a lot of history here. I like what this image is actually. This is pretty good. If I wanted to, I can compare it to the original. And it's, you know, it's subtle, but I really want to save this with all of my history because maybe I want to go back and play with it. So I can simply go over here, and on the Macintosh, instead of saving, which would overwrite the original file, we're following Apple's new strategy of move to. And if I click on move to, it actually allows me to do what we define as a save as. So I can go ahead and I can say Olivia Prescott. This is actually the, I like to always save the original camera notation. So if I can find my original image, but I'm going to say first cut because that's the first try I had. And I can hit save. So what you'll notice is the document has now saved to the new version. If I go back here and I go to open recent, I can go ahead and open the original document, which is right here. You don't necessarily need to open both of these up. I just want you to show you where things are stored and how I can go back and forth. So this is my original document, which I actually never did save at the right point. And if I wanted to jump back here to the new one with the first cut, I can go ahead and I can say, yeah, I liked everything. I want to go back to that black and white preset. And now I want to blend my opacity. And of course, you would probably end up doing a lot more complex changes. So what I like, and I love to do this, I love to make an image black and white, really tweak on getting just the black and white to look exactly how I want. And then I like to reduce the opacity, let a little bit of the color bleed through. Sometimes if I'm feeling very adventurous, I can go ahead and I will play with a variety of blending modes to see how that black and white influences the color image below it. So I'm going to go ahead. I like the way this image works, and what I want to do is I want to save it at this state. So because I've already made changes and I've saved the other document, I can go ahead and I can save this one with a new name. I can go ahead and I can click on Move to again. This is a save as, and I'm going to call this Second Cut. And just to not be consistent, I decided to use a number, and I'm going to simply hit Save. And what I've successfully done is I've saved a new document with all the new history that I might have created. I've gone back into any point in time, made any changes I want, and now this document will have a different future than the previous one. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this for a moment and show you what the original documents in my Finder look like. So we'll go to File. I want to hide this. There we go. Hide Luminar and close those. And there are all the different versions with all of the precise history that I did for each of these. So it's very easy for me to go back and find exactly the version I liked if I wanted to modify it. So that's a really quick overview of some of the things you can do with the history panel, how you can generate a project file that saves the history, and how you can also export out an actual photograph that you can use to show off to people, to send to clients, and to post to the social networks, as well as to perhaps your portfolio. Now, Lori, has anybody posted any questions, or does anybody have any questions about what I did, or actually even anything you might be a little bit confused about when it comes to using Luminar?
Oh, you did a great job covering history. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
There is a question about the undo button that's next to the history button, the differences between the two.
So what the undo button will do, and I'm going to actually show you the history here. So we see I play with the opacity, I activated a layer. The undo button will step you back one at a time. And usually, instead of using the undo button, I actually would use the undo keyboard command, which is Command or Control Z, or for 90% of the rest of the world, Command or Control Z. And this steps you back one change at a time. If I go to my history panel, I could have done the same thing by simply clicking down to the previous version. So it's really ultimately the same net effect. What the history panel allows you to do is go back to a specific point, but the stepping back or just going back to one undo is pretty quick when you know you just made a mistake and you just want to like, oh yeah, shouldn't have done that. And you can hit Command or Control Z and step back. And if you need to continue to step back further, you can continue to use that keyboard shortcut. You can also find that underneath the File menu. Let's see, undo. There we go. So undo, there it is, Command, and on a Windows machine it would be Control Z, Control Z. And if I wanted to redo, Shift Command Z. So I can step backwards and forwards using backwards using the button, backwards and forwards using the keyboard shortcut, or if I wanted to quickly jump or see what I've done, at that point I would use the history panel. Two ways to get to the same place.
Okay, great. Abba, if it's okay with you, I'd like to show people where they can find some more educational content relating to history, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And if there's any more questions, feel free to type them in there in the question box.
Yeah, we're here to answer questions if you've come up. And by the way, there's no silly questions. I know some of the folks here may have never seen Luminar, and others have been using it for previous versions and the current version. So if you have a question, your question might benefit other people watching right now.
Great. Okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and change the presenter over to me here. All right, so I wanted to show you a few things. Both Abba and I are in the education department here at Skylum. And so our goal in life right now is to make sure you folks really understand all the ins and outs of both Luminar and Aurora and some other products that we have. So our focus right now, of course, on this webinar is history. So I want to show you some great content that you can find. Now, at this recording right now, if you go to macfun.com, In fact, I'm just going to go there for you, macfun.com, without the Luminar. Okay. And it'll be Skylum pretty soon here. You'll see there's a menu on the left-hand side of the screen. And if you click on that, that's where you can access a lot of our educational content, user guides, etc. So first of all, if you click on user guide, I'm going to go ahead and click on here. It's going to take me to the user guide section. Let me go ahead and just refresh here. There you go. For both Mac and Windows. So if you're a Windows user, you would just click over to Windows, and you can look at that information there. Now, Richard Harrington put this together, did a really great job on getting all the information that you need on Luminar. I mean, everything from each slider, individual slider, which is great. So this is an example of Windows here, as you can see. Now, what I would recommend doing, though, is either clicking on Mac or Windows, but scroll down to the bottom and download the PDF file format. It's a little bit more robust. It's easier to find things if you wanted to do a search, so you can look for it there. Okay, let's take a look at some other things. We do a lot of videos here. So if you go under Video Gallery, click on Video Gallery, you'll see a bunch of really great quick tutorials. And these are tutorials that you can just jump in right away, get some great information, don't have to spend hours trying to learn something. What I recommend doing is just at the top here, if you're looking for, like maybe a quick start PC, trying to get up and running on the PC, just click on this tab here. Or maybe you want some inspiration, go ahead and click on inspiration. You'll get some inspiration here. Or look at all of them. So you can go ahead and take a look at those. We have other people outside, like Nicole Young does quite a few videos for us, Jim Nix, Matt Seuss, etc. as well. So you'll get a variety of different content creators with their point of view, which I think is always important. Okay, so those are our videos. Going back under this menu again, let's go ahead and take a look at the blog section. And what we do here is we go ahead and we'll post different genres of photography. If you're into nature, or let's say, here's one, how to photograph in the rain. It's not just about our products, but actually about photography. So you'll find a lot of really great information here. So we've just posted some history panel information. So you'll see right here, there's maximizing flexibility in Luminar for future edits. This is a great one that actually shows you what Abba was showing you about saving native files, etc. Let me go back here. We do image makeovers, and that was what's using the history panel, etc. So you might want to take a look at that. One more thing, I'm going to go back to the videos real quick because I want to show you a quick search as well. Besides looking at the tabs at the top, there's a little search function here. And if I wanted just to look for history, you'll see here there's two videos that we currently have, Mastering the Luminar History Panel for Creative Control, and also Unlimited Undos with the History Panel. We'll be adding more in there, but that's a quick way to find a particular subject, feature, or tool that you're looking for. We're also on Facebook. If you look under Skylum Photography is a great site to look at. We have a lot of posts there, Skylum_support. If you have some support questions, you can also look in there as well. Okay, great. So I think that's it for now. And Abba, do you want me to switch back to you, or as we answer questions?
If there's any questions, I can address them. I'm looking at the ones. I think you addressed most of the questions that people had typed in. Did you do that, or should I address some of these?
I think, well, a couple of them. There's one by Philip who was asking about the differences between Mac and Windows. Mm-hmm. I think Abba did a really good job talking about the parity between the two at the time of this recording. So hopefully very shortly we'll be able to match everything.
Yeah, and I do want to, the big thing is it doesn't save the history, but I do believe you can do a save as. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to make another version, or you can duplicate it on Windows before you start working with the new version. It's just so you can, of course, make multiple versions, but the history at this point is doesn't get saved. But that is, I would say extremely high on the list, but it's higher than that.
Yeah.
So just be patient on that one. You'll see it.
Okay. Michael is asking about needing preferences to store user options, file locations, etc. Michael, we're coming out with a digital asset management program, and that should be in 2018. And I think that will probably cover some of these issues that you're asking about. So that'll be a really handy feature. It'll be a module within Luminar, so we're really excited to be able to release that to you. Okay, and then David's asking, where do you typically save your Luminar project files? Same folder as original or in another folder? And Abba, I'll let you take that one.
I actually create a folder where I have all my Luminar files. They're actually for a specific project. The way I organize things right now before the digital asset manager comes out is I like to keep all my original raw files together, so I can always go back and find them in, say, if I want for another application. And then I'll save the Luminar project files in their own family of folders. One of the nice things about the way Luminar works is that even if my original files are offline, if I'm using photographs on an external drive, because it does save the original file within the Luminar project file, I don't have to worry about clicking on something and saying, well, I have all your history, but I don't have the image. So I do keep those separately, and that can be by client or by event. And I usually like to actually save an exported JPEG sometimes, because if I look at this, and let me go ahead and switch over, because you might have noticed in some of my examples that I have both here under faces, because you have the Luminar icon, but you can't see exactly which image that might have been. So by saving a smaller JPEG next to it in that same folder, it allows me to see, oh yeah, this is what the project file is, but if I want to take a look at the the image that I created, I have a very easy way to open that up and see, oh yeah, that's the one I work with. Because how many times have you named something and forgot which one it was when you went back to look at it? So this allows me to quickly visualize what the image is, and then I can open up the actual Luminar project file.
Okay, Abba, any last words?
Yeah, the big thing is that we're very responsive. We're out here for you. One of the things that I really like about Luminar and Skylum is we're a community. And so there's the Facebook accounts, and you can post your images, which is really nice because it's a very supportive community. There's a support Facebook page. So, when you get into trouble, there's a lot of resources you can go to, and the community often answers questions too. So, dig in deep and have fun. That's really what's important.
Right. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks, Abba, for a great presentation, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.